I don't think that they're tired. I mean, these parties are ideological. They actually like Russia better than Ukraine. You can have a situation where you do have a ceasefire, but you actually don't agree to territorial losses. Ukraine is not going to resume the war under those conditions. It'll be Russia. It's not that they don't understand that Russia is going to go further if they defeat Ukraine. They want that to happen, so they're not worried about those consequences.
Professor, good to see you here in Kyiv with us. And you're a frequent traveler to Ukraine. Unfortunately, I see that in the United States, the dynamics of mood is not that much in favor of Ukraine. We see that more and more people are against Ukrainian victory, to be frank.
Well, I don't think it's a large number. I think that there's an extreme right wing of the Republican Party that's turned against Ukraine. But even among Republicans, I think the support is still there. When Speaker Johnson allowed his caucus to vote for the aid package, a majority of Republicans voted for it, and a large majority of Democrats. And so I think the support is still there. It's just that we have this extreme right wing that's extremely loud, and their voices somehow dominate a lot of the discussion.
And there is correct, it dominates not only in Congress, and we'll see what a composition of Congress would be next year, but also it sounds in American society. We see that support is diminishing. Am I correct in my assessment?
I'm not sure that in terms of votes in Congress for aid that it's diminished that much. I think that the problem is that Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. He does not like Ukraine, and therefore his fanatical followers will repeat anything he says. But I think that, for the rest of, first of all, Donald Trump is not the United States. Hopefully he's going to go down to a pretty solid defeat in November. And then, we'll have to see how Kamala Harris handles Ukraine, but she does not have any of his hostility to Ukraine.
Let's talk about attitude of both politicians and society towards end of war. Mm-hmm. And let's start from your vision. How do you see it?
There are divisions within the American public on this, obviously. I think that, again, the extreme right in the United States has basically taken the Russian line that says, the war has to stop. If you listen to the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, Trump was asked, what do you think about the war? And he says, well, it has to end. And what he means by that, it ends on Russian terms, where Russia gets to keep what it's taken, and you get some kind of a ceasefire. But she was very clear that that's not an acceptable outcome, that, for the Democrats, Ukraine, the goal of the war is still for Ukraine to win. Now, whether that's realistic or not is a different question, but I think that, again, you shouldn't take too seriously, the things that Donald Trump's followers say, because they don't represent the whole American people.
Let me slightly disagree with you. I've been to DC a few months ago during the NATO summit, and I did not witness a willingness of ordinary Americans to see Ukraine winning. To have Ukrainian victory. Well, to end the words, it's definitely supported by vast majority, and it's not in Texas, it's in DC.
To say Ukraine should win is a very abstract thing, and I think that the real policy choices come down to what level of risk Americans think they're willing to take in order to have Ukraine win. The real issues right now has to do with exactly what kind of weapons and what use is going to be made of them. You supply ATACMS and F-16s, are they allowed to hit targets in Russia? Now, I can assure you, ordinary Americans have no opinion about this whatsoever. They're willing to talk about abstractions like, Ukraine should win, there should be peace. But if you ask them, well, should the range of an ATACMS be limited to, 100 kilometers, or should we extend it to 300 kilometers? They have no idea. They simply have no opinion. And so I think it's a little bit dangerous to attribute too much specific opinions, to this kind of general public. I think in general, many Americans would be happy to see the Biden administration lift some of the restrictions that they've placed. I think a lot of this actually comes from President Biden himself, not necessarily his advisors, but he's the one in charge up until next January.
And there is a very important topic. What is behind these limitations? Because to be frank, I don't buy explanations that it's about escalation. We've seen every step that was warned about it would lead to escalation, and nothing happened. Mm-hmm. We've seen Kursk, and nothing happened. Why do they still limit Ukraine in the fight?
You have to ask President Biden.
But maybe you feel that.
No. I think the danger of escalation is really pretty minimal. You really have to pose that question to President Biden.
I would like to do so. And do you see that the new team, if and when Kamala Harris wins, would be different?
Well, we don't know. I think that part of the problem with President Biden is that he has very long experience in foreign policy. His judgment has actually not been that great in all circumstances. I think he made a lot of mistakes, for example, in Afghanistan and Iraq. He wanted to split Iraq into 3 different countries, which I think in retrospect would have been a terrible idea. But because of that long experience, I think he has a lot of confidence in his own judgment about foreign policy. And that makes him less flexible than somebody with less experience. So we'll just have to see how she does if she is elected.
Unfortunately, we see, and it's not limited to the United States, it's an overall, let's say, West attitude, that we see that Ukraine is gently pushed towards, I would say, some concessions. Well, because negotiations in close future means concessions. It's gentle, but we are still pushed. What is behind this?
Leaders, are feeling political pressure. We live in democracies, and not every decision that leaders take is, supported. So one of the things that's going on is in every democracy, the AfD in Germany, the National Rally in France, and the Republican Party in the United States have turned against Ukraine. I mean, that's as simple as, the German state elections that just happened in Thuringia and Saxony, the AfD and then this new left-wing party did extremely well. And so there's growing explicit opposition to Ukraine coming from extreme right-wing populist parties.
People are tired.
Well, I don't think that they're tired. I mean, these parties are ideological. They actually like Russia better than Ukraine. You have to, it's a very strange psychology. So I'm not sure it's tiredness. It's the fact that there is, growing explicit opposition to Ukraine on the part of the extreme right. And for various reasons, I think, the populist right has been gaining ground in a number of countries, including, the Republican Party in the United States.
How do you personally see a victory of Ukraine?
I don't think that you're going to have a kind of 1945 victory where Ukraine marches into Moscow and the Putin is, kills himself. That's not going to happen. And I also think that, the ability of Ukraine to liberate the whole of the 1991, territorial extent is going to be very difficult at this point. And but I also don't see politically it being possible for any Ukrainian leader to actually sign a peace agreement that gives away 1 inch of Ukrainian territory. So, I think realistically what we're talking about are the conditions for a ceasefire, not a peace agreement. And that's a very complicated thing because I do think you can have a situation where you do have a ceasefire, but you actually don't agree to territorial losses. And, that's, I think, really what we ought to be thinking about because, like I said, I think it's pretty unlikely at this point that every inch of territory is going to be liberated militarily.
I fully agree with these assessments, but at the same time, it puts us in another danger. It means that war is not ended but paused, and it would be resumed, either by Ukraine or by Russia. So what?
Well, that's why I think NATO membership is important. Ukraine is not going to resume the war under those conditions. It'll be Russia. And so in order to deter them, I think that that's why you need...
Ukraine can. If we have our territories not liberated, we would do our best to return it.
Well, that's true. I think that there's pretty powerful incentives, for that not to happen. Right now, I think that apart from the possibility of a breakthrough in the Donbass, one of the big issues is the Russians keep shooting missiles at Ukraine, and you have to have some way of stopping that. I don't think that just better air defenses are part of it, but that's not a stable situation. 10 years from now, the Russians still send, 100 missiles there, 100. That's not a workable ceasefire, right? So you need some agreement that people will actually stop actively shooting at one another, and then you have to have a way of deterring the resumption of a full-scale war after that point. And that's, I think, where NATO becomes very important, or some equivalent of NATO membership, some kind of, pretty solid military guarantee.
What could be an incentive for that temporary solution, Because even this ceasefire is a concession, not a final one, but anyway. What can lead to?
Well, you obviously have to increase the pain that Russia's suffering. I think that one of the pain points is Crimea, because I think, with appropriate long-range fires, you can really make Crimea uninhabitable by the Russian military. So that's one thing. I think that, I'm quite supportive of Ukraine's ability to strike into Russia itself, because I think that they're vulnerable. Their civilian population hasn't really experienced the war, and so if you can make them do that, that would be important. But basically, Russia is not going to agree to a ceasefire unless it feels, compelled to do so. And right now, they're not feeling enough pain, for that to happen.
Is it realistic to reach that point under Putin? Because I doubt so.
Well, if that's the case, then the war is just going to continue, and it may. We don't know.
Okay, I hope that one way or another, black swans would appear and Putin would be replaced, because to me it seems the only solution. Don't you think so?
Even under Putin, if they feel enough pain, I think that they will give up. For example, they've got severe manpower shortages right now. That's part of the reason they haven't been able to really respond to the Kursk, intervention.
Let's focus shortly on the United States and its vision of the US in the world, in the new world.
I think that Americans tend to think of themselves as a dominant power. I think that most Americans are aware that the internal polarization in the United States has weakened the country, very greatly. And there is a wing of the Republican Party that is isolationist, that they don't want America to play a big role in global politics. They don't like alliances. They don't like, they don't like Ukraine, but they also don't like NATO. They don't want to be tied down in Asia with Japan and Korea. So, this used to be the dominant kind of ideology of the Republican Party up until World War II, and now it's coming back under the leadership of Donald Trump. And so that vision of America does not include it being a global superpower, using its power to stabilize things around the world. So that's something new, but it's only a part of the American public.
I just try to understand that do Americans understand that if Russia wins at least partially, if Russia wins to some degree.
You have to understand that for the extreme right in the United States, they believe that Russia is a Christian country, that it's part of Western civilization, that Ukraine is promoting this liberal, gay rights ideology, and they're actually on the Russian side, so they actually want the Russians to win. Now, that is a very small part of the right, but it's gotten more powerful in recent years. And so it's not that they don't understand that Russia is going to go further if they defeat Ukraine. They want that to happen. They want that to happen, so they're not worried about those consequences.
Vast majority just does not have a clue on what do they want.
I'm not sure that they don't have a clue. I think a majority of Americans, if you ask them, do they want Russia to win, great majority will say no. But the question is, are you willing to pay, you know, another $60 billion for that to happen, as opposed to spending that money on, you know, poor Americans or other American needs? And at that point, they said, no, we think that we should take care of our own people before we take care of Ukraine. So, and that's, you know, that's actually a reasonable point of view in a democracy.
So everything goes about leadership and the decision of the leader. Let's hope the new leader would understand how much it is important for the United States that Ukraine wins. And thank you for your efforts in explaining that to American people and for supporting Ukraine.
Okay, thank you very much for talking to me.